Hi everyone. So welcome to my presentation on the Mental Health Movie Project. Today I did my movie on Lars and the Real Girl. So just to start out, I will be giving some background information just because I think it's kind of like necessary when you're figuring his disorder, like what came to develop it and what his daily life is like, and why that took place. So we'll start with the main character. So Lars is the main character. He's featured in the picture in the background. His mother died during childbirth with him, and it was basically just like a rough childhood for him that was revealed to us in the movie. So he grew up with a father who was grieving a lot. His older brother left the house as soon as possible, so he was really taken care of by no one, and he wasn't really given love or attention growing up as much as he should have. So that kind of goes into our diagnosis. And so the diagnosis for Lars in this movie is schizoid personality disorder. Now, this wasn't officially diagnosed for him in the movie per se, but we can compare with the DSM-5 and listed symptoms that this is indeed what he had. So just a refresher, schizoid personality disorder is a personality disorder that's characterized by extreme discomfort in close relationships. They usually have very odd patterns of thinking and perceiving and behavioral eccentricities. So basically, after observing Lars for a while, his family wanted to know what was going on, and they went and saw a professional that told them that he had been compensating this illness for such a long time that it resulted him in having a little moment, and that's basically what the movie is set around, is Lars having a delusion, and he has a few panic attacks throughout the movie as well, but this delusion is really the main plot of the story and how he goes throughout that. So first, to start out, I think it's just important to review kind of what a delusion is, and I always get it mixed up with a hallucination, so I thought I'd just like talk about the two of them and compare them. So a delusion is a fixed false belief. The person with this delusion will persistently hold this belief despite any evidence that contradicts what they believe. But a hallucination, on the other hand, are a person who has senses or feelings that feel really real, but they're not. So this could be like hearing someone speak to you, or seeing someone, or like having like feeling like someone's touching you. So like these sensations and perceptions feel real, while delusions are really just like a belief that you think is going on. So we'll discuss Lars' delusion. So again, this is like the main plot of the story. He lives with this delusion, and the delusion is he buys a sex doll, which is not used for this purpose in the movie, but he believes that this doll, which he names Bianca, is a real person, a real girl who's like his close companion and girlfriend. They never maintain like a sexual relationship, but it's really just truly like love and companionship throughout the whole movie. So basically, when this happens, everyone's freaking out, like thinking he's crazy, and they go to a psychologist, and they tell him that, or she tells them that she believes that Lars is working through an internal psychological problem within himself, and that's what the delusion is for, is to work through that problem. And I'll just add with this movie, like, I've seen a lot of previous movies that portray like mental disorders, abnormal psychology, and they're all very good. For one comment, I'll say, like, normally with those movies kind of like have a scary vibe to them, or just like portray the person as really odd and it's kind of creepy. Um, just kind of like a negative connotation to it. But this movie was very positive and like upbeat, and knowing that any regular person can suffer from a mental disorder. So I added this movie quote that the psychologist said in the movie that I really liked, and it said, "This isn't necessarily a bad thing. What we call mental illness isn't always just an illness. It can be a way to work something out." So I like that. It's like a new take on viewing someone with a mental illness. It's not necessarily like weird, but maybe it's just like their way of coping with something, like they're working through something right now. Okay, so now we'll get into a little bit of how the disorder affected his life. So obviously with schizoid personality disorder, we know they can't form really close bonds with others. That's the case for Lars. So it affects his romantic and sexual interests for sure. Never had a romantic interest. He's not really close with anyone, likes to be isolated, and doesn't like to touch people. So that's on one spectrum of how it affects his life. Another thing that may have just been like my view of how it affected him was his self-image. Um, from what I understand, like if your mother died during childbirth with you, I feel like I especially would take a grunt of the pain, knowing like I would feel guilty thinking it was my fault. So I think like that has a lot to do with how he thinks about himself, and he just overall doesn't believe he's worth he's not worthy of love or intimacy. And I think when you like shut yourself out from relationships, whether it be like friendship or sexual romantic level, that can take away a lot of what you perceive about yourself as negative. Because I know like we're around our friends and we're around our family because they make us feel good about ourselves and they make us feel happy, but he doesn't have that. So I feel like that could definitely be a hindrance on his self-image. And then I will just add in this. So we talked about how he doesn't like to be touched. In a scene where he's like at the doctor's office, he's to the point where like if physical touch on himself advances into like legit like pain. He describes it as like a burning or a frostbite sensation. So okay, and then another thing I took away of how it affects his life is just like how he copes with problems. This again is just kind of like my takeaway from it, but coping with problems seems to be pretty common in everyone. I think we can all agree that we find that one person that we could confide in to talk about our problems or just like to share our frustrations with. But he can't do that. Like he doesn't have a close relationship with anyone. He is really just to himself. He can't confide in anyone, so he has no relationship to like discuss those problems or concerns. So I think that could really have an effect on how he copes with his problems. Okay, and then another thing is how it affects his fears. So, throughout the movie, like you can notice that he thinks he's gonna hurt someone if he like shows love and affection to them, because the way he like hurt his mother, of what he thinks from it. And additionally, his brother that's in the picture right here, his wife, so his sister-in-law, is pregnant, and he always fears that something bad will happen to the pregnant sister-in-law, just because of what happened in his childhood. And I think that's really what spiked the overall like um delusion in the first place, like that it opens up the movie with her being pregnant. So that's what my takeaway was from it. Okay, and then some more how it affected his church and work. Really, this didn't affect a lot in this area. He was able to maintain a full-time office job. I mean, he was never like progressing in his career. It was pretty routine job, but the mental disorder didn't like um debilitate him from going to that job and keeping that job. And then additionally, he does regularly go to church as portrayed in the picture above. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the treatment that was shown in the movie and how effective it was. But basically, they had to treat Lars secretly. It wasn't very open. Like, he didn't know he was going to treatment at the time. So the physician, who is also the psychologist, would um, treat Bianca, the doll, with her regular scheduled treatments because she had a health problem of low blood pressure. So Lars would go to these treatments, he would be with her, and during that time as she was receiving the treatments, um, he would be discussing with the psychologist. So a lot of stuff that was shown was like regular psychotherapy, just like discussing. And then there was a scene that included aversion therapy. And if we want to be refreshed, aversion therapy is used to help a person give up a behavior or habit by having them associate it with something unpleasant. And at first I was a little confused as to why like she was using aversion therapy, but really they would start discussing his fears in life and um, just like life in general. And like I talked about before, he has legitimate physical pain when he's touched. So she would like see how much tolerance he could take of being touched, and that would kind of like spring the aversion therapy. Okay, and the last treatment that I took away, it's not a medical treatment, but I think it really made the biggest difference in the movie. Um, so basically, it's like this small knit community, and everyone in town accepted Bianca, a doll, as like a real girl, like really his companion. And they did this by like including her in things. They would invite them to parties together. They got her hair done. They would go shopping with her. They got her a job. They'd go to church with her. Like so many things to make her seem as real as possible. So everyone around would treat her like a real girl. And this really started initiating like the process of like Bianca having her own identity, her own life. She became independent, and that like the doll being like his comfort object slowly like fades away from him. And I think this like really like made a real stepping stone progress for him to like move out of that phase of being with her and just seeing how she can be independent and how he can be independent. That was just my takeaway from it though. Okay, and then I will discuss if this treatment was effective. Um, I would say not immediately, like I couldn't see when it started to work, but eventually, towards the end of the movie, you can see that it did take a huge effect on him. He started to come out of his shell more towards the end of the movie. He didn't really need Bianca anymore, and he shows that. His delusion starts to like progress into her getting sick, and then I don't want to spoil the movie, but ultimately he doesn't need her anymore. And then towards the end he will show more intimate feelings to a girl, so he's feeling like that romantic relationships. And then overall, like the treatment, I just feel like the community helped more than anything in like um acknowledging and just being accepting. So my lasting thoughts on this, honestly, like I recommend this movie to anyone. Um, but just because like it portrays it in such a happy, positive way, it wasn't creepy. Like I feel like all the movies I talked about, all the movies with mental disorders are just kind of weird, but this one was actually very good, and it showed the importance of um, how it portrays the regularity of mental health and how common it can be, especially in like a little town. And support is so necessary when facing such mental adversity on yourself. It's just important to have those close bonds with others, even if it's not like personal bonds. There's a way you can be kind to those and just like show compassion and normalcy to those who are dealing with it. So, yeah, that's my thoughts for this movie. Thanks for listening.